Assalamu alaikum. So today we will have the general overview of the forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain formation, the cavities of the forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain, the connection between the cavities and the cranial nerves which are associated with the brainstem or with the midbrain bones and medulla oblongata. So first of all, the neurotube which is formed at the third week from the ectoderm. Neural tube which forms from the ectoderm will have the cranial end and the cephalic end. The cranial end will give three primary dilations. The cranial end of the 1, 2, 3. The cranial end of the neural tube will give three primary dilations and the cephalic end will elongate. So these are the brain primary vesicles. This will be the vesicle for the forebrain, this for the midbrain, and this one for the hindbrain. And the caudal or cephalic end of the neural tube will form a spinal cord. Okay, now these three primary dilations will be further subdivided into five secondary dilations, such as that forebrain, which is also known as Brainstem, will be the primary vesicle for the forebrain will be divided into the telencephalon and diencephalon. The telencephalon will further give rise to the following structures, which it will just give rise to the cerebral hemisphere, while the diencephalon will give rise to the thalamus, second one hypothalamus, third one pituitary. These are the primary structures which are derived from the diencephalon. And now the midbrain will remain as the dilation for the midbrain will remain as it is, while the dilation for the hindbrain will give rise to the two further dilations. One is myelencephalon and the other one is metencephalon. The myelencephalon will give rise to the just one structure, which is medulla oblongata, while the metencephalon will give rise to the bones and cerebellum. Okay, so at the third in the third week the ectoderm will give rise to the neural tube. The cranial end of the neural tube will produce three primary vesicles, one for the forebrain, second for the midbrain, and third one for the hindbrain. The forebrain vesicle will be further divided into the two dilations, telencephalon and diencephalon. Telencephalon will further give rise to the cerebral hemisphere, while the diencephalon will give rise to the thalamus, hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. And the midbrain will remain as the vesicle for the midbrain will remain as it is, while the hindbrain vesicle give rise to the myelencephalon and metencephalon. Myelencephalon will give rise to the medulla oblongata, while the metencephalon give rise to the bones and the cerebellum. So this one is covered. Cavities of the now cavities which are associated with them. So telencephalon, which give rise to the cerebral hemisphere. Lateral ventricle will be present as a cavity in the telencephalon, lateral ventricle. Okay, and the cavity for the diencephalon is a third ventricle, and the cavity for the medulla oblongata plus and the cavity for the medulla oblongata is fourth ventricle, as well as the cavity of the pons is also fourth ventricle. Okay, now the if we took this is very bad, but this is a rough sketching. So this is the telencephalon, forebrain. This is the midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata, and spinal cord. Midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata, and the spinal cord. So now if we took we take a view from this one is the spinal cord. So the cavity of the spinal cord is the spinal canal. Okay, this is spinal canal. The cavity for the fourth and the cavity for the medulla oblongata and the pons is the fourth ventricle. The cavity for the midbrain is the this will be like this, but if we cerebral aqueduct. The cavity for the if we take this is as a diencephalon, the cavity for the diencephalon will be third ventricle, and the cavity for the cerebral hemisphere telencephalon is a lateral ventricle. So the cavity of the spinal cord is spinal canal, the cavity of the medulla oblongata and the pons is the fourth ventricle, and the cavity for the midbrain is the cerebral aqueduct. The cavity for the diencephalon is third ventricle, the cavity for the telencephalon is lateral ventricle. Now this the cavity of this fourth ventricle and the third ventricle is connected through the cerebral aqueduct. So the connection between the third and fourth ventricle is a cerebral aqueduct, which is the cavity of the midbrain, while the connection between the lateral ventricle and third ventricle is the foramina of Monro. Between the connection between the third plus lateral ventricle is Monro. Okay, so the connection between the third and the fourth ventricle is the cerebral aqueduct, which is the cavity of the midbrain, and the connection between the third and lateral ventricle is the cerebral aqueduct, which is also known as the aqueduct of Celsius. So this is the third objective is also covered. Now the cranial nerves which are associated with the brainstem. If we take a simple view from this is the midbrain. So the midbrain would have superior colliculi and the inferior colliculi. The nerve which is present near the superior colliculi is the third cranial nerve, and the nerve which is present near the near this inferior colliculi is the fourth cranial nerve. Oculomotor and the trochlear nerve. Near the superior colliculi would be third cranial nerve, and near the inferior colliculi will be the fourth cranial nerve. Now this is the midbrain. Now if we this is midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata. Midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata. Now 3/4. Now in the center of the pons will be present the fifth cranial nerve. At the junction of the pons and medulla, from medially to laterally will be present 6, 7 and 8. At the junction of the medulla and pons will be present the 6, 8 and 6, 7 and 8. From medial 6, 7, 8. From lateral 8, 7, 8. From lateral is 8, 7 and 8, 7, 6. Okay. Now the 6, 7, 8 is covered. Now from the laterally from the medulla oblongata will arise 9, 10 and 11 cranial nerves. In the medulla oblongata, the area is medulla oblongata in turn will is divided into the pyramids and the olives. At the junction of the pyramids and the olive is present 12th cranial nerve. So the associated cranial nerves with midbrain are third cranial nerve and the fourth cranial nerve. With the pons is a fifth cranial nerve. At the junction of the pons and medulla oblongata is at the junction of pons and medulla oblongata is a 6, 7, 8. Medial to lateral 6, 7, 8, and the cranial nerves which are arising from the medulla oblongata laterally are 9, 10 and 11. The hypoglossal or 12th cranial nerve is present at the junction of the pyramids and olives inside the medulla oblongata. So this is the general overview which is made simplified. So if we revise, the neural tube arises from the ectoderm in the third week. It the cephalic end of the neural tube give rise to 3 primary vesicles for forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain, and the cephalic end extends to form the spinal cord. The forebrain is further divided into the telencephalon, diencephalon. Telencephalon gives rise to the cerebral hemisphere. The cavity for the cerebral hemisphere telencephalon is the lateral ventricle. Diencephalon gives rise to the thalamus, hypothalamus and the pituitary, and the cavity for the diencephalon is the third ventricle. Midbrain vesicle will remain as it is. The hindbrain vesicle give rise to myelencephalon and metencephalon. Myelencephalon give rise to the medulla oblongata, and metencephalon give rise to the pons and the cerebellum. The cavity for the medulla oblongata and pons is fourth ventricle, and the cerebellum is attached at this level. It will midbrain will be connected to the cerebellum with superior through superior peduncles. Pons will be connected to the cerebellum with middle cerebellar peduncles, and the medulla oblongata will be connected to the cerebellum with inferior cerebellar peduncles. Midbrain through superior cerebellar peduncles, pons through middle cerebellar peduncles, and medulla oblongata through inferior cerebellar peduncles. Now the associated cranial nerves with the brainstem. Third and fourth cranial nerves are associated with the midbrain. Third cranial nerve is present near the superior colliculi, and fourth cranial nerve is present near the inferior colliculi. Fifth cranial nerve is present at the level of mid bones, and 6, 7, 8 cranial nerves are present at the junction of the medulla and the bones. 9, 10 and 11 cranial nerves are arising from the laterally from the medulla oblongata, while 12th cranial nerve is present at the junction of the pyramids and the olives. So, and third and fourth ventricle is connected. The cavity of the cerebral hemisphere is lateral ventricle, diencephalon on third ventricle, midbrain cerebral aqueduct, pons and medulla fourth ventricle, and the spinal cord. The cavity of the spinal cord is spinal canal. The third and the fourth ventricle is connected to the cerebral aqueduct, which is also known as aqueduct of the Salvius, and the lateral ventricle and third ventricle is connected through the foramina of the Monro.